Bandwidth for This Week in Sales provided by liquidweb.com.
There's 6 reasons why your sales manager is failing. Learn how to fix those on today's episode of This Week in Sales. Hello and welcome to This Week in Sales. I'm Kevin Gaither, the VP of Sales of BetterWorks here in Santa Monica. You may recall the goal of the show is to help sales professionals with tips and tactics and techniques to help them improve their performance right now. Today's guest is Gil Cargill, founder and CEO of Cargill Consulting Group, a 35-year-old sales acceleration consulting firm. Gil, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, Kevin. How are you?
I'm good. Gil, I always ask my guests, what's your nightmare sales job?
Nightmare sales job in the history of my career or right now?
Whatever you want to cover.
Well, as a very young man, I had a job selling vacuum cleaners door to door. And that not only prepared me for what I do today, but I encountered a few nightmares. Literally, in one home, they had no floor. So how do you sell a vacuum cleaner when there's literally a temporary structure? That was probably the biggest nightmare of my entire career.
How do you overcome that objection?
I left.
Exactly. It's about disqualifying.
Exactly.
Right?
You can't sell what you can't sell.
Very good, very good. Well, before we get going, I certainly would love to formally introduce you. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Good. So, my guest today is Gil Cargill, as I said. Gil Cargill is North America's premier sales acceleration coach. He has developed a process to identify and remove most of the sales process obstacles. As a result of improving the process, his average client increases their top line by 35%. As you'll learn, his tagline, "It's not your people, it's the process." And that applies to most companies today. Fix the process and you will fix sales. Visit Gil and Cargill Consulting Group at www.gilcargill.com. That's GILCARGILL.com. So Gil, you've been doing this for 35 years.
That's correct.
What's the biggest problem in sales that you see right now?
The number one problem is hiring salespeople. The typical client that we work with is a small to medium business. Typically, the owner is also the de facto sales manager or could be one of the salespeople. Unfortunately, these people hire salespeople based on friendship qualities, not based on forcing proof that the salesperson can actually sell. As a result, they make what the Wall Street Journal refers to as the $500,000 hiring mistake, which simply means that every person you hire that doesn't work out will leave in 6 months to a year, but while they're with you, you'll lose $500,000 in cash and or opportunity dollars. And we work hard with our clients to prevent that in order to offset that or to avoid that cost and drive the top line.
Mm-hmm. So I've seen that the stat actually phrased differently, and it can vary. $500,000 being a huge number,
Yep.
But oftentimes what I've seen, Gil, is the number represents 6 times their earnings or 6 times their base salary or something like that, and so that can vary quite tremendously. Either way, making a hiring mistake is really, really expensive. And as you know, most sales managers might as well flip a coin in their ability to identify high quality A players that are going to drive revenue. Now, you know the show is all about tips and tactics and techniques, so I'm not going to let you get away with just the broad, you should hire better.
Right.
So, you know, for those playing the home game here, Gil, what should sales managers really do? In other words, they watch the show and they want to improve their hiring success. Give me a few specific tips and tactics that they should do right now.
Well, number one is never hire anybody unless you have observed their selling ability. And I force that by creating an audition where the candidates come in and they present my client's company's products or services to my client and to myself prior to extending an offer. That probably is the number one issue. Observe how they sell either their current product and or your new product. The second thing is I ask all candidates to bring 3 years worth of W-2s in for the interview. And the reason we do that is we're looking for alignment. A large W-2 doesn't mean that they sold a lot, it just means they got paid a lot. So we want to dispel the falsehood that frequently arises in the interview, which is, I made $100,000 last year. And I've had people say that and claim that until I say, great, bring in last 3 years W-2s. And I literally have had a few people say, did I say 100,000? No, I meant it's more like 30,000. So that's part of the issue. We're proving the facts that are there. And I also want to make sure that the comp structure that generated the W-2 aligns with the comp structure of my client. For instance, a high base and a small portion of the W-2 being commission doesn't complement an environment where the company needs to acquire a large number of new customers. So that's vital. Third thing that I always look for is the behaviors and habits of that individual. Solitary people who like to sit by themselves don't necessarily have the people skills necessary to be an outgrowth in sales, and never hire anybody because they say they like people. I frequently tell them, my dog likes people, but he can't sell. So that isn't what we're looking for.
Good. Give me the one question that you would ask to identify whether or not they really are a people person. What can they take away from this?
The one question I always ask is, tell me, when was the first time in your life that you recall competing for something? You see, my experience is the hunters, the men and women who gain new business, who go out to the territory and bring in new accounts, have been competitors since they were 3 years old. So typically, when I ask, when was the first time that you recall competing for something, I'll get a response of second or third grade, maybe fourth grade. Now, I'm not looking for athletes, but I'm looking for competitors. And if you ask that question, you'll quickly sort the hunters from the spectators. And spectators are okay, and most companies need one or two, but if you're trying to grow your top line, you must have hunters.
Right. I love that. So much organic conversation here. This is fantastic. A couple of things. You know, one, I love that you said, I'm not necessarily looking for athletes.
Right.
I'm looking for competitors.
Exactly.
And I think that, and I've made this mistake myself, so I know, I've made the mistake of saying, hey, they played varsity water polo at Berkeley, so that must mean they are competitors. And in fact, that's not true. I've never seen that to be a direct correlation because of the hiring mistakes that I've made. Right. And we've actually had guests on the show before, Gil, Dr. Chris Kroner being one of those never hire a bad salesperson again.
Right, I've met him.
He's fantastic, and competitiveness is one of those aspects of drive. Tell me about the last time you were competitive. Great. And then tell me about another time. And for truly competitive individuals, those are frequent occurrences.
Lifetime patterns.
That's right.
The competitor, whether it's an academic competitor, I've hired competitors who wanted to be first string in the orchestra. It's competition that is the trait I can't train. Another tip for the audience is hire based on things you can't train. And the mistake that I see is a lot of people hire experience, but there's no correlation between experience and ability. So if you have drive, if you're competitive, and if you have mental agility, which is the ability to deal with a lot of different things as they come up, you probably can learn the product, the process, and the industry.
Amen.
So hire for abilities and traits that can't be trained.
Amen. Now, I have to challenge you here, though. I was measuring my interview process, and we did throw a demonstration in as the last check of my interview process, and I would give them a little cheat sheet on here are some basics that you need to know about our product. Now you're going to call us, and I'm going to pretend to be the decision maker. My partner will be the gatekeeper, and we'll work through a sales scenario. Now, I did find that 65% of the people that got to that process or got through that process, I found that 65% of people made it through that process. Okay, so the majority actually did. What it taught me, and I would love to hear how maybe I did this wrong, that told me that they knew how to do the job, but but not that they would actually do the job.
Right.
So I found some very good actors
Right.
who made it through that process, Gil,
Right.
of that 65% that actually couldn't sell a darn. And so where did I go wrong, you think?
Well, there are two questions that have to be answered. Can you do the job? And the second question is, will you do the job?
That's right.
And there are a large number of salespeople, in my experience, who are very good at getting hired, but aren't necessarily as good at selling the products they were hired to sell. So the secret sauce is to implement one of the services that we offer, which is a 16-week-long transition plan. And when we're hired by a client to recruit and hire a salesperson, I won't do it unless I'm allowed to co-manage that new employee for 16 weeks. That co-managing separates the wheat from the chaff. Before an offer letter is extended, we show them their 16-week program. And I'm amazed at the number of people that look at it and go, this is a lot of work. And being sensitive, I like to say that's why we refer to this as a job.
Right.
But we find that some people are discouraged, but every Friday they have to check in and have to prove that there's been an increment in proficiency. If they miss one Friday, they're on probation. If they miss two, we start over.
Okay, well, good. Well, you're actually segueing into my next thought for you, Gil, was once you bring them on, what's next?
Well,
in the normal world, most people don't have the ability or the resources potentially to have a 16-week long program, right?
Well, if you don't, then you're going to spend $500,000 to find out you made a mistake.
All right, so what should they do?
Well, the 16-week program requires about an hour per week of the manager's time. We write these so that every Friday the new employee checks in by phone or face-to-face and proves that they gained an increment of proficiency. The clear mistake is managers tend to measure dollars, not the activities that produce dollars. As I said in my blog today, you can't manage sales, you can only manage the activities that produce sales. So you have to lay out activity objectives that are incrementally growing over those 16 weeks and observe the behavior of your new employee. The mistake that's made is they're hired, they're told the coffee's over there, your territory is over there, there's your desk, go get them Bubba or Babette. And management assumes, because there's commission involved or a perception of motivation, that the sales representative will go after it. And that's a big part of the mistake. So over the long haul, you have to manage the quantity and quality of activity and then correlate those to the dollars produced. The metric that I like to observe is the activities per opportunity. How many phone calls, how many meetings, how many letters, how many emails are required to generate one opportunity? As you start measuring that, and it's easy to do with any of the CRM software products that are out there today, as you start measuring it, you start seeing, Billy Bob's working real hard but not generating opportunities. So maybe Billy Bob isn't using the right quality or the right script or the right energy. There's something missing. But until you measure activities per opportunity, you tend to be managing as like a pilot without instruments in the airplane.
Mike Brooks, sorry, not Mike Brooks, Bill Brooks of the Brooks Group out on the East Coast.
Right.
He always said, you can't drive a car by looking in the rear view mirror.
Absolutely.
And measuring the sales and saying,
You even
hey,
picked up a little bit of his Carolina accent there.
Have I? Yes, y'all. But I must be missing something, Gil, because if I heard you correctly, here's what you said. There's the coffee, there's your desk and your territory, and now you're saying, and here's my expectations.
Right.
Is that the secret sauce?
Absolutely.
Or should there be something else that happens on day one?
Well, day one is training and orientation. And training and orientation goes until the new employee can prove that they are proficient. When I was hired by IBM, my first product line was the typewriter. And ask your parents and they'll tell you what those were. We spent 6 weeks in a class learning how to sell the typewriter. And learning how it worked was easy, but mastering the demonstration and the presentation and offsetting objections, closing, negotiating, dealing with price objections were all practiced relentlessly for 6 weeks. And when I left, I was very proficient. Some people weren't graduated. They were not allowed to graduate because they hadn't progressed. Now that type of training has gone by the wayside, but I think it's time to bring it back because we spend enormous amounts of money, energy, and candidly, hope on people who can't or won't do the job.
Right.
So, and it's our fault if we hire good talent, but we don't give them proper training, proper sales practice, aka role playing, which a lot of salespeople hate to do.
Sure.
But I've never understood why that's so disliked.
Right.
Pro football players practice football.
Sure.
Pilots practice flying. Doctors practice medicine. Salespeople tend to believe, oh, I went to training 15 years ago. I don't need to go anymore.
Sure.
So I like to avoid that.
Yeah, we actually talk about that quite a bit, and I've actually had a few guests on the show that say role playing, I'm not a big fan. Why? Because it's not real, right? And I could appreciate that, but I also fall back on that on the NFL analogy and just say, gosh, there's no NFL team that's going to make it to the Super Bowl if they don't practice.
I can't tell you how many punishment laps I ran in college because I'd tell the coach, this isn't a real game, it's just a scrimmage.
Right.
And the coach would scream, laps till dawn, Cargill.
Right.
So yeah, it wasn't real, but it's the practice in an environment where you can't hurt yourself that's important. I'm a pilot as a hobby, and I fly simulators to keep my flying skills sharp, because if I make a mistake in a simulator, my son, who's also a pilot, will laugh at me. I'll have to buy him a beer, but nobody gets hurt. Right. Salespeople crash and burn in front of customers all the time, and because there isn't any practice occurring, they aren't cognizant that they made the mistake because no one has shown them where those mistakes are. So I really believe that we need to practice every week to perfect our skills and keep them sharp.
So I went to the dentist last week, Gil, and the dentist said, Kevin, you need to floss a little bit more. And I said, yeah, I do. And I haven't flossed in 5 days. What you're telling sales management out there is that you need to be doing better training, more regular training, as well as practice, along with the sales reps. What's the disconnect? Why don't they do that? Why don't most sales managers do the practice that every expert like yourself says, you want a good sales team, you want a world-class sales team, you need to practice. Yeah, I need to floss too. Why don't they do that?
Well, I think it goes back to the fact that as of this year, to the best of my knowledge, there's only 1 or 2 universities in North America that offer a diploma in sales management. And I haven't confirmed that, but I've heard it second or third hand. And there are about 20 universities that offer diplomas in selling. Consequently, we have a large number of people who are sales managers that were promoted, by and large, based on their sales ability, not on their managing ability. And here's how that particular phenomenon comes about. If Charlie was a great sales rep, Charlie's promoted to sales manager. Charlie assumes, and I know I did when I was a new manager, well, I did it and it's easy for me, so why do I have to coach my people? Now, I was lucky, I was working for IBM, and our rule, our mantra was every Monday night, we hold sales practice. So as a new manager, I just followed the rules. But when I left IBM and started my own practice and started working with other companies, I realized that what IBM did automatically was not the norm when you get out in the real world. But practice creates excellence. And the manager that wants excellence in his or her team's performance must practice and must observe how they're selling. One of the other reasons that managers don't enforce this is I believe most sales managers are like a football coach who only gets to hear the score but doesn't see the game, doesn't see the game film, so really doesn't know who executed properly and who didn't, who fumbled and who didn't. The team comes back from an away game and says, Coach, we won or we lost, and the coach responds appropriately. I want coaches, aka sales managers, to observe how their team operates. It's vital.
Right. And that's distinct from, and I think that people say training and coaching together, like they use those words together as if they are the same thing, and they're absolutely not the same thing. It's you get on the field, or you diagram out a play, right? And this is what we're going to do, and then the coaching is observing them, acting either in practice,
right?
Okay, or live. That's good. And some of that shoulder-to-shoulder coaching also extends into the pipeline, correct?
Absolutely.
So one of the things that, and I told you this before, and I originally found you years and years ago through Inspect What You Expect.
Right.
And that sticks in my brain, and I want you to tell our managers, because this is one of the areas where they are failing right now, pipeline management, right?
Well, if your audience will go to my website, gilcargill.com, click on the link on the homepage to subscribe to my newsletter, and I'll send you a toolkit which contains the pipeline inspection tool. This is a pre-flight checklist, to use pilot vernacular, to apply to every opportunity. And it's designed to inspect the funnel. My philosophy is nothing should be allowed into the pipeline unless it meets certain criteria in terms of timing, budget availability, applicability, other issues. If it gets into the funnel, then we have to account for it every month. Why did we win it? Why did we lose it? And or why was it postponed? And if you stop and think about it, once it's in the funnel, there are only three things that can happen. You win it, you lose it, or it's postponed. And if the salesperson doesn't understand why they won, then they can't repeat that. If they don't understand why they lost, they can't avoid making that mistake again. And if they don't understand why it's postponed, they won't know how to build urgency, so postponements occur less often.
Right.
So in our toolkit, which is available to your audience, they will see the initial plan. Just use that document. Some of my clients laminate it. Others make the salespeople fill it out. It takes 5 seconds. It doesn't matter. It's just 17 points. Either it is or it isn't qualified. If it's not, go back and qualify it. If it is, go get them. But we're trying to keep people from forecasting based on hope. And I see too much of that today. Why will they buy? Well, they need us. Why do they need us? Well, they're in business. I understand that. Why or what problem are we going to solve? Well, we have a solution. To what problem? Well, we have a solution. To what problem? And you know, I'm having a little bit of fun with the language.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, if you don't know what problems they have, you clearly can't solve them. You can only hope that you can solve them. So I encourage managers to drill down on the pipeline, look at every opportunity, and measure it against the initial plan in the manager's toolkit so that they will be able to determine whether or not they have a real opportunity or not. And the real benefit of this is the salespeople aren't allowed to become discouraged. The reason, number one reason salespeople leave the profession, good salespeople leave the profession, is because they burn out, because they're discouraged, because they've had failure too frequently and too often. So this avoids that and helps them with that.
Right, I love that. One point and then a follow-on question here for you, Gil. We actually on the show have talked about the concept of a sales cylinder, more importantly, than a sales filter, you know, or funnel, excuse me, right? Because we would rather have 10 opportunities that are super qualified go in and 10 come out the bottom, right? So let's talk about a sales cylinder as opposed to fill the pipeline with 40 or 50 things and hope that three come out. And it sounds like you're saying something very similar. We want to protect that pipeline so that we're dealing with a sales cylinder as much as we can. About right?
Well, whatever graphic you use, you know, there are thousands of people in any market at any time in need of a solution like my client may offer. So we have to take that large number of people, apply some rules to find the ones that are sales ready. So what you're talking about is the difference between inquiries, very top of the funnel, leads somewhere in the funnel, and sales ready leads that are in the cylinder. So I agree, if 10 go into the cylinder, 8 should come out, rule of thumb. But if 10 go in and 3 come out, there's a problem. You're either put the wrong 10 in or you're handling them incorrectly.
Excellent. So if you had to ask, if I just turned over and I showed you one opportunity out of my team's pipeline right now, what would be the first, without even seeing the deal, what would be the first question that you would ask, bar none, on every opportunity that you'd look at?
Why are they talking to you?
Why are they talking
What's
to
the compelling issue? They're not lonely. You know, they don't need company. So there's some reason, some compelling issue that prompted that decision maker to grant you a phone meeting or a face-to-face meeting or to open your letter or whatever. If there's no compelling reason known to us, then you're engaged in showing and praying. It may work, it does work occasionally, but it's very imprecise, and it contributes to that sales rep burnout I mentioned a moment ago.
Right. So when we find, not if, because we're dealing with big pipelines that have a lot of junk in it, when we find that a sales, and again, we're talking from the manager perspective here, when we find that we can't answer that question with any sort of validity or good solid answer there, as your guide, your leader to them, you tell them to go back and find the need.
Right.
Right? And,
Absolutely.
And if they're not able to find that, when they're talking to that customer, not what do they say to me, but what do they say to the customer? When that customer is not really articulating a problem or a want, what's the subtle nuance of basically like, I don't know why I'm sitting here in front of you in the first place, okay?
Well, I ask that question. I teach sales reps that work for my clients to ask the question politely, out of curiosity, what was it that prompted you to grant me this meeting?
Right.
And they have to tell you something.
Right.
Now, they may say, oh, we're just looking. May I ask why you're looking and what results? And that's the failing of a lot of sales processes today, is we ignore the results. We talk about the machine or the service or how great our people are, or licenses they have or whatever, but we rarely drill down and say, well, out of curiosity, Kevin, what results do you anticipate achieving should you go ahead with a relationship with our firm or one like ours?
Right.
And if you come back and say, well, I just want to see how it works, then I may say, I think I hear someone calling me, I have to go home now.
That's right. No, and I love that. And what you're saying is just be direct.
Exactly.
Be direct and find out. I was on a sales call with a rep just last week, and I asked that question because the woman that I was talking to was very standoffish. Yet she agreed to this meeting, and she was basically telling me reasons why, me and the salesperson, telling us reasons why this wouldn't work and why that wouldn't work. And so I stopped. And she was going to agree, by the way, to a second meeting a month from now to discuss this. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
All right, I don't want either of us to spend that time here. I'm curious, why do you think we want to have this conversation, and what do you think might change, in a month from now? Because I'm hearing a lot of things, and these are the words that I'm using, Gil. These are, I'm hearing a lot of things that suggest that this might not actually be a good fit for you. And you know what? If it's not, that's okay.
Right.
Better figure it out right now. What was interesting is that she started coming back.
Right.
And selling herself on why we were having the conversation, and just by having that direct commentary, with her, changed the tone a little bit, and it made me realize whether or not this was a real deal for us to be focusing on, or not. Give me some coaching. What should I have done better on that call? You think?
Did it perfectly. By taking it away, you made your relationship perceived to be more valuable. The desperate salesperson who says, yeah, I'll come back next month. I'll send you some brochures. I'll get you demos. I'll get you trials.
Right.
If you communicate desperation, you're screaming that you have an inferior offer. If you demonstrate, as you did, the fact that many may be called but few are chosen, and you may not fit here, and that's professional and it's the truth. And I find that when I tell customers, I don't know if I can help you or not, it diffuses some tension. And furthermore, it's the gospel truth, because when I first meet you, I don't know if I can help you at all. You may be in my business, I run into some dysfunctional companies, and I can't help them, or I don't want to.
Right. Good. In closing here, are there some final pieces? Right. We're talking about the 6 things that your sales manager is doing that is leading them to failure here. You want to round that out with any final thoughts? And again, we're talking tips, tactics, and techniques, Gil. So what should they be doing?
Inspect that which you expect. It's a cliche, but it's the gospel. You have to do that. Never assume that your marketing is working. Marketing is designed to introduce your salespeople, not to do the closing. Hire good men and women. Have good practice sessions weekly. Don't assume that skills will magically improve or maintain, because they will retard over time. Spend time in the field with your salespeople as a coach and as an assistant to the people. Don't be a remote control coach, staying in the office pulling wires, and drill down on the funnel every month. In the toolkit, we have a manager's calendar when you should do what things. And we also have in the toolkit our guide to hiring sales superstars. So anybody in your audience that wants either of those, just go to gilcargill.com and subscribe to the newsletter, and you'll get a link and you can download both of them.
That's fantastic. Well, that's all we have for this week. What an awesome show. Gil
Thank
Cargill,
you.
thank you so
Thank
much
you very much.
for
Very
coming
fast
on the
half
show.
hour.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Great tips and tactics there. So as usual, if you have any questions for me, feel free to email me at askkevin@thisweekin.com. Of course, also feel free to like our Facebook fan page. Finally, tweet at us at SalesWeek. And you'll find our shows also on YouTube, and that's www.youtube.com/show/This Week in Sales. And of course, you can find us for your audio and video pleasure on iTunes. Download a couple of podcasts there. Next week, we're going to have Anthony Iannarino on the show, and he's going to be talking about how to become a level 4 value creator. We're not talking about Dungeons and Dragons stuff here. We're talking about sales. Thanks for joining us this week, and have a great week of selling.